Hello and welcome to our lesson on nonverbal communication. It is brought to you by the University of Languages and International Studies. In this video lecture, we will discuss the nonverbal code systems which are part of the communication process. After watching this video lecture, you should be able to define nonverbal communication, identify the characteristics of nonverbal codes, and identify different types of nonverbal codes in intercultural communication. Let's get started. To define nonverbal communication, firstly, it makes sense to differentiate nonverbal communication from verbal communication. Verbal communication, as you learned from the previous module, means communication with words. Those words can be spoken or written. Nonverbal communication may mean everything else but words, including the tone of your voice if you are using verbal communication. So, put it another way, nonverbal communication refers to the use of non-spoken symbols or non-linguistic means to communicate a message. So, what are the nonverbal symbols that we use to exchange information? According to Lustig and Coaster, nonverbal codes encompass the ways that people communicate with their words, and they include all forms of communication other than linguistic ones. Think about it this way. The words I am using are verbal communication, while everything else such as my facial expressions, gestures, eye contact, and even my appearance are nonverbal. These nonverbal codes can become part of the communication process with or without the awareness of the communicator, and they show his or her feelings and attitudes. If when texting, you use emojis either instead of words or as decorative details to what you write, you are using nonverbal communication. Even when you are looking at the slide, all the colors, the font of text, the visual image of President Donald Trump placing two fingers on his temple while listening are examples of nonverbal codes. From the previously mentioned examples, we can see that verbal and nonverbal codes may communicate meanings together or separately. In fact, they are inseparably linked together to form the code systems through which the members of a culture convey their beliefs, values, thoughts, feelings, and intentions to one another. For example, we often use a nonverbal message to repeat a point we are trying to make verbally. It's quite common that we wave goodbye while saying bye-bye to our friends. However, it seems to be inappropriate to wave hands and say bye-bye to an old person in Vietnamese culture. Small children are often taught to cross their arms and bow to older people while speaking. Say, con chào ông, con chào bà, con chào bố mẹ ạ. Now, let's talk about the characteristics of nonverbal codes. First, nonverbal communication messages function as a silent language and impart their meanings in subtle ways. People process nonverbal messages with less awareness than they process verbal messages. Second, most of the verbal messages are continuous and natural, and they tend to blur into one another. For example, raising one's hand to wave goodbye is a gesture made up of different muscular movement. However, it is interpreted as one continuous movement. Third, as there are no formal sets of rules to provide a systematic list of the meanings of a culture's nonverbal code systems, the meaning of nonverbal messages are usually less precise than are those of verbal codes and are only made clear within a particular cultural and situational context. It is difficult, for example, to define the meaning of a raised eyebrow in a particular culture. It may show a sign of surprise. It can also be a sign of disagreement. We need to base on specific contexts to interpret the meaning of this verbal code. It is impossible to categorize all the different types of nonverbal codes. In these video lectures, we are reviewing 7 types of nonverbal codes which are argued to be most relevant to intercultural communications. They are kinesics or body movement, proxemics, the use of space, chronemics, the use of time, haptics, the use of touch, physical appearance and dress, vocalics, the use of voice, and olfactics, the use of smell, scent, and odor. Also remember that all of these codes are really symbols that stand for something else. How we interpret or misinterpret these codes is based on context, culture, knowledge, experience, and perception of the message receiver. The first category is kinesics or body language. Kinesic cues are those visible body shapes and movements that can send both intentional and unintentional messages. They include facial expressions, gesture or the movement of a specific body part, especially hands or head, posture or positions of the body, eye movements, and so on. While all people use body movements to communicate, how people use and interpret them may vary across cultures. For example, in Japan, the common greeting is to bow to your partner, while in American, the common greeting in business is to shake hands. Another example is the thumbs up sign that we are quite familiar when using Facebook. We often click the thumb up button to express that we like a post. In American culture, people also give a thumb up to show their approval. However, in Iran and Iraq, a thumbs up has the same meaning as a middle finger in American culture and should be avoided. Proxemics refers to the use of space, including personal space and territory. Personal space refers to the distance within which people feel comfortable when interacting with others. Cultural norms and the relationships between the communicators determine the use of personal space in communication. For example, people from Latin America often feel comfortable standing close to each other, while people from European countries or North America prefer a relatively greater distance. Lovers stand close to each other during a conversation than colleagues do. Territory stands for the space that an individual claims permanently or temporarily. For example, it is very likely that a student sits in the same seat in a classroom where he or she sat at the beginning of the semester, even though there is no assigned seating. If someone else takes that seat, the student may feel as if his or her spot is taken. Chronemics refer to the use of time. Our concept of time may influence our communication behavior. For example, a meeting in an African village does not begin until everyone is ready. A 45-minute wait may not be unusual for a business appointment in Latin America, but would probably be insulting to a North American businessman. Edward Hall, the author of High and Low Context Cultural Taxonomy, categorizes time orientation into monochronic orientation, which means time is viewed as highly organized, and polychronic orientation, which means time is viewed as open and flexible. The next category is haptics. Haptics refer to the use of touch, which send a myriad of messages: protection, support, approval, or encouragement. As usual, where, when, whom we touch, and what meaning we assign to touch differ widely across cultures. The amount of touch also varies with age, sex, situation, and the relationship between people involved. North American culture generally discourages touching by adults except in moments of intimacy or informal greetings, for example, handshaking or hugging. Meanwhile, touch is extremely important in Italian culture, and people frequently use touch during a conversation or a meeting. Physical appearance refers to the way a person looks. The communicator's observation of each other's physical appearance often takes place first in interpersonal communication. People can wear a particular type of clothes to communicate culture, religion, status, power, personality, self-esteem, and social identity. For example, Muslim women are often easily recognized by wearing their headscarves called hijab, which are important symbols of religious faith. Vietnamese women are recognized through áo dài. Young people getting tattoos to express their identity. Plastic surgery is another example of using physical appearance to communicate messages in which many women believe they must conform to society's notion of beauty. Vocalics or paralanguage refers to how we use voices. Our voices can complement the verbal messages, the words we are using, or contradict, and they convey much of emotional meanings. For example, laughing loudly may show that you are very happy, while screaming may mean that you are very angry. Paralanguage includes such aspects as rate of talking, such as fast or slow, pitch, such as high or low, volume, such as loud to soft, laughter, scream, and even silence. People may use silence to show respect, agreement, or disagreement, embarrassment, sadness, repressed anger, and so on. Olfactics refers to human perception and use of smell, scent, and odor. We spend a lot of time and money making sure we are clean. We choose fragrances for different occasions. For example, the fragrances of jasmine, lavender, and roses tend to communicate a soothing and pleasant feeling to people. The perfume industry therefore makes billions of dollars every year on selling products of these scents. Nevertheless, people's smell preferences are not universal but vary across cultures. Well, so far I have introduced some basic concepts of nonverbal communication. You should remember that nonverbal communication involves the use of non-linguistics means to communicate. These nonverbal codes function as a silent language, impart their meaning in a subtle way, and tend to blur into one another due to their continuous and natural nature. There are no formal sets of rules to understand the cultural meanings of nonverbal codes. Finally, there are 7 major types of nonverbal codes which are argued to be most relevant to intercultural communications. However, despite certain universality, how people use and interpret them vary across cultures. Alright, I hope you find this lesson informative and useful. Stay tuned for other video lectures. Thank you for watching and bye for now.